Yeah, I think, probably from understanding what the challenge is ahead of this next game, the talent that we'll see in Baylor and the respect that we have for them and what they can do offensively, it really didn't lend itself to, there's some bye weeks where you say let's focus on us, so and maybe get some other guys some work and all that stuff. That's not where we're at, and so it was very much kind of Baylor centric. Understand the volume of their pass game and everything else, and also understanding that very hard to simulate, that type of skill coming at you, and again in the volume we anticipate. So that's what allowed it to do, which is good. I thought the guys handled it real well. It's one thing to script plays and run cards and scouts and all that stuff. It's another thing to have guys dialed in and focus on some of those things. So I was pleased with that.
What kind of challenges does Baylor's quarterback present to you? He seems to be more of a passing quarterback. What can that kind of challenge your defensively?
Yeah, I think the good coverage doesn't necessarily mean you're going to talk them out and throw them the football. Good coverage just simply means you have to be prepared for a competitive, situation. Hopefully at the catch point, and so you're doing everything you possibly can to put yourself in the best possible situation. That when he does throw it, you can't be naive enough to think that because you're body on body or you're in the proximity of a wide receiver or tight end that he's not going to throw it. His ability to throw guys open, they make tough catches. They also do a great job of we say running the grass, in zones and some of those things, and recognizing man coverage versus everything else. And so that's the difficult part is trying to simulate that. And one of the challenges to the guys is you do it once and you cover it. Maybe certain weeks they don't come back to it. This is not one of those opponents. And then if you get too pass specific, very efficient running the football, I'm more than willing to do so. So, and that's probably a little bit of a misnomer that way. You see the statistics from a passing standpoint. One of the reasons is the ability to do both and getting some quality backs, and they do a nice job. If you have too many eyes on wide receivers, then you're going to give up something in the run game. So, yeah, big time challenge.
Coach, reflecting back to the win against West Virginia, this defense has felt elite all season, but you were mentioning there has to be an emphasis on turnovers. They finally got a couple turnovers that game. How have you seen from the team's response and then accepting that challenge to get those turnovers?
Yeah, no, it's production matters, and it makes it very very difficult defensively if you're not creating negative plays, if you're not getting stealing possessions for an offense, and that's not unique to us, and that's not my opinion. That's just reality of it. And so it's a strain, and it becomes a situation where you're very fragile at times if you can't create some negatives and that. And so was really pleased that way, to get some production that we've talked about, as you mentioned. And the cool and the messaging to the guys is none of that was the call. It was them. And in some situations you're kind of like, I don't know if that was a good call or not. And similar to a quarterback that we're talking about that can make a play when some guys can find production in the backfield, which was really, really good. And obviously highlighted by a sack, cause fumble, and those things can change games.
You hear the phrase matchup nightmare a lot when you hear talk about athletic tight ends or big wide receivers. So watching some tape now, what stands out about what makes Michael Trigg a challenge to cover?
Yeah, I mean, you wish the film didn't match the production. You wish you could then, spot holes in it and say, oh, there's some discrepancy, and it's not as real as it appears, type of thing. But unfortunately, in this case, it's exactly as you described it. It's a matchup that makes it very, very difficult to, from a size standpoint, he'll use that. From an athletic standpoint, he uses that. So you can't just dismiss one or just circle one attribute that way. And then the ability too. Then when he does make the catch is a tough guy to bring down, and that's another thing that stands out. Same thing when you haven't studied the team yet. You kind of start with the stats and you see the numbers, and then you look at the yards after catch and some of that. Not just in his case, but across the board they do a nice job that way. But no, there's unfortunately just with what they do and the amount of explosive guys they have, is very difficult to say, well, that's the one guy you got to cover. And so you get a chance, as they do a great job of getting guys singled up, and he does a great job coming down with it, makes some highlight plays, and so no, it's going to be a difficult challenge in terms of man or zone, and putting the right bodies on the bodies, and then rallying the troops if and when he does catch it.
Coach, with your unit not on the field this week, did you get a chance to study up Baylor a little bit when they went to play Cincy this past weekend?
Yeah, we did, and that's you say it's an advantage, and obviously in the end by midday Sunday they're studying us just like we did them type of thing. But no, you watch it and you're trying to find commonalities. Maybe some of the things that we did, or some of the things that if they've had success on something on a particular situation in the game or coverage and that okay, well, does that fit something we do, or is it something that we're willing to do or willing to install? And so you do that with all opponents. But no, of all the games you can watch on Saturday, that's the one that I think they came on at 4 o'clock, and I think every single one was kind of glued to that. And, just anxious to, especially coming off a bye week, because you feel like you've watched so much of the tape, and you watch it. Sometimes you kind of nerd out on some new video type of thing.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because following up with that, because Cincinnati ended up limiting Baylor's quarterback Sawyer Robinson to his lowest passing yard so far this season. So, like, what have you noticed about their secondary and defensive effort that you can kind of notice that week that you can use?
Yeah, I mean, full credit goes to Cincinnati. I thought they played very well. I mean, there's probably some missed opportunities if you're asking Baylor. As they look back on the video on some of those things, and again, credit goes to Cincinnati. I thought they tackled very well, and that's one of those things too that you can get maybe too overly focused on saying, okay, that's not them catch of football, and the numbers just suggested that's not necessarily going to be available to you. But it's a game of touchdowns, not first downs, and put them in a situation where you can, we say, I've mentioned in here a number of times, knock it down and move on, and don't let one play in the pass game turn into 2, 3, and then stack plays that way. And so I thought Cincinnati did a real nice job that way.
Obviously, there's still 5 games left, and it's still kind of one game at a time. But with the bye week coming just past the point of the season, where do you feel your defense has grown the most and has you excited for this finishing kick to the season?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is maybe because it was the bye week, and yes, you're talking opponent, but you're also a little bit in the way of just running calls against plays, and there's a little bit less of the specifics of that opponent, right? Because it's partly because you don't want it to get stale as you get into game week, and maybe just allow a little bit. I mean, I'm not very good at it, but a little bit of kind of standing back and watching and hearing the guys communicate, and then we go against the offense, coupled with some of the things with scouts, and seeing them problem solve. In real time, and less in the way of coaches' interactions, and sometimes you got to discipline yourself as a coach because you want to say something, and but in reality you're not on the grass with them over the course of a game. And one of my chief complaints has been at times, and I've alerted the guys to this, like if this feels like a spring ball practice, if you are needing a coaching point or a reminder on every single thing based on that formation versus this call, it's very difficult to play good defense. And to your point, especially this far into the season, and so I've been pleased with that, and it showed up on game days. I think problem solving has been one of the things that's allowed us to compete and play quality defense at times. And but that during the bye week, you just kind of observe a little bit, and they're saying the right things to each other and handling some things, and that's going to it has to continue, and certainly. This weekend included.
We talked with Coach Frost a little bit yesterday about the evolving coach carousel going on. Tell me how it's been personally. Coach Frost said one bad season doesn't define you. Tell me a little bit personally what it's been to be here and build a defense that's been playing so elite.
Well, specific to this season, I mean, the opportunity to get on the grass with these guys, and I get every coach is different. I can obviously just speak for myself, but you romanticize a little bit what coaching is. That's why we all got into it, or the bulk of us, I think. I don't think I'm unique that way, but 23 years ago, the idea of being a college football coach, the thought of being that started well before, I got out of college. It's just the idea of building a program is something that it is, I don't know if it's harder to do or easier to do or whatever, timelines and everything else, but I'll stay away from that. But there's something about that, and so we forget sometimes as it's year one, but there's something about getting a group of guys together in January and let's see what we can get done, with them over the course of a calendar year, and then obviously in the hopes that you get opportunities to do it past that single year. But midway through the season, they start feeling like your guys and all that stuff, and so that's kind of where we find ourselves. And then okay, we got 5 weeks left, and I think I mentioned in here. Now you got some shared experiences like that, and I don't know. There's reasons you coach, and one of that is that you can get something done with a group of guys that if you weren't in that room, they wouldn't be as successful. They don't need us. They play the game, we don't. But anyway, you're constantly reminded of that as you go through the season.
Dave Aranda obviously came up as a defensive coordinator. I'm just curious, did your paths ever cross, or do you know him at all?
I don't know him well. We've met. Yes, our paths have crossed over the years, and I got a lot of respect for him, what he does, his ability to build defense, get guys to play hard, and just it's one of those films wherever he's been. We have the availability to crossover filming there in conference, but even out of conference, it's one I always watch, and that's just from a respect standpoint. What he's doing and how he can attack teams and everything else, and so no, he does a tremendous job.
Jaden Bellamy has been such a standout corner for you guys this year. What has he done to kind of step up and be so reliable?
Yeah, he's scrappy. You can tell, a guy that's played football. I mean, that's the one thing over, and maybe basketball's been a little bit more of an example because they kind of dealt with transfers maybe a little bit more than we have, or maybe it's just an easier study because there's 12 of them and then play, everything else. But the older guys, there's something about guys that've been in the fire, and it doesn't mean they've been successful 100% of the time, but that's part of it. They have some experience behind them and know what works, know what doesn't work, and kind of can draw from some of those things. And so he's one of those guys that you're not confused as to his experience level. He gets it. He's played well for us. We need him to continue to, and thrilled that we have him.
Baylor's been a team that's fallen into some holes and often played some of its best football in comeback fashion. So what's the challenge of facing a team that even when they're 14 down or something like that, if things are going well for you, that they could pop off and put together consecutive touchdown drives like that in a heartbeat?
Yeah, and I think that's valid, that's accurate. I think it's and Coach Babalow does a guy I've ran into over the years that does a great job offensively, and you don't say air raid as much, and I'd say that in a positive way. They run the football a whole lot more than Coach Leach ever did, type of thing, but they don't have to change, and there's an advantage to that offensively, because what you don't see, okay, well now the score is this, so then let's scrap this part of the playbook, and then we'll start doing new stuff or stop running the football. They're going to run the football selectively when they get light boxes and some situational scenarios, and from a pass game standpoint, it's not like, all right, let's get our third down pack, our 2-minute package that we've is small, something we only do a small portion of the time that now we need to do because we're down a couple scores, and so they just keep doing what they're doing. So the scoreboard for them is not something that kind of affects how they play, which is really critical for us. That it's the exact same way on any side of this deal, that we got to make sure that there's respect, that if they have success, then they can fully continue down that path to continue to have success until we can break any momentum. And then conversely, if you got some momentum, you got to respect the fact that they're not changing, and they're kind of built for it.
Do two more. The defensive line, the strong part of the defense this year, has taken some blows with the injuries to Horace and the injuries to Sincere. What kind of impact does that have on you guys as a line? What's the confidence in the next man up?
Yeah, and it thins you out. I mean, it obviously puts more pressure on the guys that are playing, and obviously creates some opportunities for some other guys that maybe wouldn't have as many reps that way. And Coach Kmart does a great job on him, Coach Dawson, and so full trust in those guys to prepare him, to put him in a situation to be successful. But no, you say next man up, sometimes it's same man up is just same man, more volume, and they got to be prepared to understand their Saturdays are a little bit different. Some guys are good players if they play 20 snaps. Well, now if that number goes up, can they train a certain way over the course of the work week to put themselves in a situation that they can be successful on Saturdays, based on new roles and everything else. And so that's a week by week thing. If you had some production 2 weeks ago, then you obviously don't get credit for it this coming week. But it's obviously part of our evaluation in terms of who we're going to put out there and how long we can keep them out there.
Coaches talk a lot about player-led teams helping to have success. Have you been able to see that with this group? I know it's a young group with a lot of newcomers coming in. You're halfway through the season. Have you seen more of a player stepping up, maybe taking more of a bigger role to keep kind of maybe going back to the practice fields and doing things like that when you guys aren't around?
No, you do, and you know, a couple guys to highlight. You know, Lewis Carter's soft-spoken, not the right phrase, but maybe, you know, as a coach, you kind of sometimes feel quiet, but when he speaks, everybody hears him and listens, and you know, Phil Dunham at times in the secondary as well, and there's certainly Isaac Kelly, when he talks, guys listen, and sometimes it's not talking, it's making sure they're saying the right things, and as best you can, you obviously want to, you know, empower them and kind of lead them in a certain direction from a coaching standpoint. But the thing we found out, or at least I think again, my opinion, just in this new wave, you know, some of it has been us trying to do too much as coaches, because you look at it through the lens of it. It's everything sandwiched. You know, at the best, you're trying not to microwave a football program. You're trying to, but at the same token, you're trying to obviously get results right now. And so, if you're not careful, it becomes real controlling and real coach centric, and maybe at times, if I'm being honest, it can be suffocating to the guys, because here comes Coach Grinch or one of the coaches constantly. And so I think the thing we found out is got to be a little bit more organic at times. Like you can force it. By and large, forced leadership doesn't work. But part of that too is having the discipline as a coach to give them room, as opposed to being the first one. You know, play happens or a poor drive or something like that, and again, everything in us is, you know, we need to attack the problem, or we're going to fix the issue. And sometimes you know, taking a breath as a coach and giving room for the guys to maybe speak up and do something like that. And so you're seeing it at times. And again, mentioned Lewis is one of those guys. And it's one thing in the practice field, it's another thing during the course of the game. You know, and so they've done a nice job on the sideline that way, handling some adverse scenarios and keep fighting in those things.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, thanks, guys.
Appreciate it.